Chapter 2. When I spoke to my mother Oshuna, she told me that she'd seen the mark before on certain convicted criminals in Emberland. The government there used it to keep track of their whereabouts. I could hear the fear in her telepathic voice when she communicated with me. Her usual confident tone had been traded for trembling. In my mind's eye, I saw the vast halo sphere of her black hair and her molasses-colored skin radiating beauty all the way from a different universe. Her usual infectious smile was hidden behind her pronounced lips, sharp jaw, and an expression of unease. She was slender like I was, but I couldn't really tell because of the cold wind furs that she was always wearing. I knew that she was decades older than me, but she didn't look like it at all. People from Xeraxia aged much more slowly than Earthlings, and Oshuna was no exception. Xeraxians could live for double the lifespan of humans, but learning that fact wasn't comforting to me. I knew that if I stayed on Earth, I'd grow to watch my human companions die around me. This is one of the reasons why I never had many friends and endeavored to keep it that way. One would have thought that Oshuna was human if it were not for her shining blue eyes. Her silky voice and graceful presence had famously disarmed countless people before they could realize that she wasn't naive. Their mistake. Her nose was wide like mine, and she used it to sniff out bullshit. Her elegance was only surpassed by her intelligence, but right then it was her worry that was most noticeable, and she had every reason to be worried. I never knew where she hid out, but I assumed it was some bunker-style safe house that she decorated the hell out of. She must have had a very small network of people that she could trust to help her survive in Coldwind. Everything I'd ever known about Xeraxia came from my mother, and her stories always fascinated me. Xeraxia was a planet that had an atmosphere allowing for an insanely unique climate. One side was littered with oozing volcanoes and fire tornadoes. This side was where the lava-rich kingdom of Emberland was located. Coldwind, however, was on the other side of the very small planet where the weather was the complete opposite. Years before, my mother Oshuna co-ruled Emberland as High Queen with my father, Gaunabi, the God King. Emberland was full of people called Embers who controlled the flame like I did. Embers made up most of the population of that kingdom. There had been some people in the kingdom who would not become a vessel for the flame, powers usually manifested in childhood. If you did not gain the ability to access the flame, you could tap into the force of balance / the equilibrium and become a sorcerer with a bit of practice. Embers called these sorcerers wielders and sometimes mistreated them because they could not channel the flame. It's for this reason that the wielders tended to have a difficult life in Emberland, and it all got even worse under my father's rule. The equilibrium is a fundamental, semi-conscious force of balance in Xeraxia's universe, and it is also the source of our life and magic. The equilibrium is seen and unseen energy that causes the awakening, and long ago, Oshuna knew that Gaunabi was next in line for it. The awakening would make him God King and grant him unimaginable and unmatched power. But before any of that happened, Hathora, one of Gaunabi's mothers, was in power as the God Queen. Hathora was awakened before Gaunabi ever was, and she ruled for 20 years until her wife Iba was killed. Gaunabi was 22 at the time. This meant that Gaunabi had 2 biological mothers. In Xeraxia, children came from ritual and magic that connected directly to the core of the equilibrium. There was always a steep cost, but skilled wielders used spells to join the DNA of any 2 individuals together. A baby would then come forth out of the light to be greeted by hopeful parents. It was learned that Iba and much of her royal house were all assassinated by controversial revolutionaries from Coldwind. They called themselves the Daughters of the Night, and they had started a small movement in their country. The daughters saw the evils being done to their people by Emberland and decided to take matters into their own hands. After the loss of her beloved wife, the god queen Hathora fell into shock and was no longer awakened due to her deteriorating mind. The script made it clear that once the seal of equilibrium marked another member of the royal house, then they were next in line to be god king or queen. Although it was usually passed directly to offspring, none of the priests could always predict who would be next with complete accuracy. Oshuna didn't need the priest to tell her anything, though. She became excited when she saw the seal etching itself on Gaunabi's chest one day, spilling light and flame all around. She watched as blue magic formed itself into a large, 9-pointed star on his torso, and she knew that this was her moment. Gaunabi was from House Blackfire, the ruling power in Emberland for thousands of years. Only the Church of Equilibrium knew for certain why the balance kept picking members of House Blackfire to be god kings and queens. They hypothesized that the Equilibrium was looking for someone in particular who could only be found in Blackfire lineage. It certainly had something to do with a once famous prophecy that spoke of some savior coming to give Xeraxia its salvation. The church had access to information and history that was often only available to the ruling god king upon request. However, as the centuries progressed, House Blackfire grew less and less concerned with prophecies and priests so long as they maintained power. Before Oshuna joined the royal house, she came from House Lightbreak. She was a powerful Ember Lord from the Flamestone district with a lot of political capital. Flamestone was the richest of the 3 districts in the kingdom, but her heart was with the people in the Dawn's Place district. Everything was always on fire in that district. People were fighting for their lives in the face of poverty and lack of opportunity. The kingdom liked to pretend that Dawn's Place didn't even exist, which only made their systemic problems worse. The kingdom even ignored the other advancing district, Zeal Point, sometimes. Oshuna knew that if she wanted to start a revolution, she'd have to get to the top, so that's what she did. After a few years of working in the highest levels of government, she met Gaunabi at a royal dinner, and they were inseparable until marriage. Although marriage couldn't stop everything from falling apart, especially since Oshuna didn't even love my father in the first place. To her, this was all politics. She wanted to stop the oppression of Coldwind, as well as liberate those suffering within Emberland itself. Gaunabi remembered what the Daughters of the Night did to his family, his Mita and his Mitahia. And he wasn't the only one either. The powerful High Lords of the Kingdom of Emberland weren't always united on many issues, but their disdain for the people of Coldwind was something that usually brought them together. Instead of embers, people in Coldwind are called cryos. Their powers manifest the same, but they control the frigid temperatures, ice and snow instead. Their priests of equilibrium worship the deep blue moon that illuminates the sky during the night, unlike Emberland's church, which worshipped their sun. Even though Cryos' way of life was about promoting peace, many Emberlands seem to love to terrify them. They have done so for generations. This terrorization rose to a new level after the Daughters' attack on House Blackfire left the God Queen senseless and threw the court into chaos. Gaunabi was devastated by the loss of his family, and so he let the actions of a few extremists represent the whole country of Coldwind. When he assumed power, he ordered every immigrant cryo, who were mostly living in Dawn's Place, to be hunted and killed. Anyone aligning themselves with Coldwind culture was to also be executed. Gaunabi knew of cryo enslavement and trafficking going on in the black markets, and he gave them his blessing after the kingdom disregarded these issues for years. War with Coldwind was going to be inevitable if Emberland kept up its behavior. Oshuna tried to get her coup started, but her control of the flame was no match for the God King, who had been awakened by the balance. Aware that she'd need to flee the country after her defeat, she used magic to hide her most valuable possession, me, a baby at the time. Oshuna waited until the God King was distracted and used a spell to try and teleport me to a checkpoint at Emberland's borders where her spies were waiting. She used the same spell on herself. Something went wrong with mine, though, because when she got to the borders, I was nowhere to be found. I'd been sent to Earth, teleported away to a different universe where I'd spent most of my life, hopping from shelters to foster homes. Heartbroken, Oshuna spent every day after that trying to find me. She escaped to Coldwind and worked every spell she could until she finally saw me one night in her dreams. I remember our first conversation happened when I was so young. I thought she was a goddess. I thought I was losing my mind. It's difficult to burn an ember, but it's really easy to freeze one to death. I doubted that my mother would survive too much longer in Xeraxia's intense cold, so whatever the next move was, we had to make it quickly. Your father is unbalanced. His reign of horror has upset the equilibrium even further than it already was before, Oshuna told me as I could feel the magic pouring through her glowing eyes. Her eyes always brought me comfort because they were just like mine. If he has a locator spell on Javelin, it's to hunt the rider and destroy him or her. He will not allow powerful magic to remain unchecked. He might not know that Javelin is yours, but once he finds out, he will view you as a threat to his rule. I looked down at my dark skin that already made me a target on Earth. I didn't want to also be hunted by teleporting lunatics with access to spells and the flame too. She could tell that was what I was thinking. From what I knew of him, he could not travel to other universes. But now that he has sent a locator spell through, I'm not sure how much longer any barriers will stop him. It might take him some time, but he will find the best wielders in the kingdom to get the job done. Oshuna's face changed. My son, I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you. I'm going to stop him before he figures anything out. Mitahya, don't! He will kill you. Nothing good ever comes from visiting the jewel, I said. He will kill you, she snapped back. He's killed enough of my people. He's killed all of House Lightbreak. He's killed enough of the cryos. I should have done something a long time ago. You tried to do... Yes, I tried and I failed. And now you're in danger once more, she blurted out. I let my fear keep me from trying again for years. Mom, you can't. Some of the houses in Dawn's Place still support me. They still hold hope that I will be able to return to the jewel, she said. But you're talking about Dawn's Place. The strength of all their houses combined is equal to 1 in Flamestone. Well, I can't just do nothing, Xander. He will find you. I couldn't see her pupils through the light. The magic was working overtime to keep us connected. He will find me. He will find everyone who has ever betrayed him. The God King will kill us all. We must act. I recognized her tone because I'd heard it from myself. There would be no convincing her otherwise. She probably had already organized the militias of the House Lords in Dawn's Place. I'm sneaking into Emberlyn tomorrow. House Goldtrace will have me, and we'll be planning from there. Will I hear from you? I almost begged as a lump rose in my throat. If I don't immediately contact you, don't worry. I'll be okay. The blue light started to fade from her eyes. I love you, son. The spell broke. It's a fucking locator spell. Those were my first words as my mind returned to where it had been before. It felt like the conversation I had with Oshuna took years. The Emberian army knows where he flies. They know where he goes. I was in the arms of a frantic Christian who broke the knob off the door to get to me when he heard me collapse. His dark eyes wanted to release tears, but he did not let them. You're so reckless, he said. I was going to call 911. Christian, my father knows where I am now. I'm so fucked. I could see Christian still trying to collect himself, but the new looming threat occupied too much of my mind. Javelin can't go back to Xeraxia. If they provoke him, he will scorch them to hell. I don't want them to even try to hurt him either. Xander, you need to calm the hell down. Christian was telling the truth. For someone who had so much control over the flame, I barely had any over my anxiety. Neither of us did, as much as he tried to act. And besides, he continued as he pressed the towel against my sliced arm, where would we even keep him? Someone is surely going to find him out there. A brutal roar cracked at my eardrums. Javelin! We rushed outside to see blue flame flickering on some of the trees. What we did not see was my dragon.